Good evening, everybody. If you could take your seats, please. Thank you very much. My name is John Fischbach. I'm the city manager of Goodyear, and I want to welcome all of you to our council chambers this evening. They double as courtrooms, but this is our council chambers. And before I get started, I'd like to introduce and acknowledge the presence of Mayor Lord, Vice Mayor Osborne, Wally Campbell, Councilmember Wally Campbell, Councilmember Sherry Loretano, Councilmember Bill Stipp, Councilmember Gary Gelzer, and Councilmember Joe Pizzillo. On behalf of the mayor and the council, thank you for being here. The city is in the process of looking for a new chief of police. This is probably one of the most important things that the city does ever in the life of a city. It's an extremely important appointment. This chief of police plays a vital role in the community, in providing the safety to the community, and also in making the community feel safe, and he makes the community feel a part of themselves. I am pleased tonight to present to you three very qualified individuals, and I think I'd like you, as I introduce you, to come up and sit in your seats. They don't have buzzers on them. The first is Commander Eric Haley from the Phoenix Police Department, and Dr. Runyon will introduce them more later. Eric? Next is Jerry Geyer. He is the Chief of Police of Yuma, Arizona. And the final is Mr. Henry William Kusan. Bill Kusan, the interim chief. Gentlemen, we have a few long days planned for you for the next few days. I'm sure you will find them rewarding, and I'm sure you will find them exhausting. I remember when I have gone through processes like these over my 40 years, and when I'm done, you go, oh, God. But anyway, we hope you also have fun and have an opportunity to learn a lot about our community. Let me explain a little bit about the process. We started months ago. We wanted to be as transparent as possible, so we started working with the community. We had websites set up so that people could put on the website their thoughts as to what type of person the community should look for in a new chief of police. The city met with various stakeholders, including businesses, neighborhoods, human service agencies, faith-based community, organizations, schools. The city also conducted an online survey asking people what they thought was the most important characteristic that a chief should bring to bear in this community. The city received well over 100 responses to those inquiries online. We also met with the police department. We asked them, those were interesting meetings. We asked them, what do you want? Bill ran that meeting. Chief Bill ran that meeting. And that meeting was fascinating. Almost, I'd say, 80 officers showed up, and they gave him their candid comments. We ended up with 110 applications, and Jim Mercer is the firm that we hired to help us through this process. He will be joining us a little later this afternoon or evening because he's in Fountain Hills this evening on another job. We identified seven semi-finalists, and key members of my staff and myself interviewed those seven and winnowed those seven down to these three finalists, which we think you will be very pleased with. This evening is your opportunity to meet the new chiefs, and it's your opportunity to introduce yourselves as the community to the chiefs. There are two components to tonight's agenda. The first part of the agenda is to set up for each candidate to answer structured questions. We will take a break and then provide an opportunity for the community to ask questions. I encourage everyone, whether you want to ask a question or not, please take one of these cards that's floating around, write your question, write your thought, leave it here so that we can tabulate it and figure out what your thoughts are. All of this feedback will be taken into consideration as part of the decision-making process. You may also submit feedback on the city's website when you get home starting tomorrow and so forth. Tomorrow, the three finalists will be participating in a number of interviews. The panels are comprised of several of my executive team members. In addition, several executive team members from police services serving on different interview panels. There is an opportunity for members of the Police Labor Union to meet with the finalists and to provide feedback. Another interview panel consists of members of the community. There are representatives from the Southwest Chamber of Commerce, the Litchfield Elementary School District, neighborhoods of Goodyear, human services agencies, and the faith-based community. So we have tried to cover a broad waterfront of stakeholders. If anybody participating on a panel is here tonight, would you please stand up so we could acknowledge you? Thank you very much. They will also be receiving a tour of the city of Goodyear and all police facilities, and all of this is designed to show these gentlemen the type of community we are. We are indeed a very special place. We are becoming the premier city of the Southwest Valley. We just finished a every two-year survey. We are rated as 94% being citizens receiving acceptable services. 98% feel safe at night. This is a community that is on the move. And you gentlemen have an opportunity to join that community on the move. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dennis Runyon, who is the superintendent of the Agua Fria High School. And the Goodyear Police Department has maintained school resource officers for over 17 years. And so we have a close link with Dr. Runyon, and we sincerely appreciate his being here this evening to help us. Dr. Runyon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, it's good to be here tonight. And again, we'd like to congratulate all three finalists. And I have some house order keeping things to share with you before we begin the process. And again, we do want to thank the council, by the way, for all your support of education and all the work that you've done with the schools and the SRO program. So we appreciate that. And this is one way that I can pay that forward, as they say. So thank you so much for your support. We'd like to remind everybody, if you could turn off cell phones or make sure they're on vibrate so that we aren't interrupted this evening as we go through this process. We do appreciate that very much. A couple things, too, to be aware of. And, again, I apologize if I have to refer a little bit to my cheat sheet here, but I want to make sure I cover everything appropriately for the evening. Remember, the first hour is an opportunity for us to learn more about the candidates. So the first hour, you'll have your note cards, and if you have questions that you want to have answered, we'll be collecting those on the break, as was mentioned earlier. So keep your cards, hold on to them. If the question's answered during the first hour, then that's good. We've done that, and we've been able to cover that for you. If the question's not answered, then we'll collect those cards during the break, and we'll make sure that we get those compiled into light questions so we can answer those questions. Remember, too, the city cannot comment on anything related to ongoing litigation presently or personnel matters. That's something that they have to avoid at this time during that process. So just be aware of that as we go through the evening. I'd also like to mention to you to keep an eye out for the candidates. This is for you. You'll have 3 minutes to answer each question. At the 2-minute mark, there'll be a yellow card that I'll refer to. If you are running over, every 10 seconds or so, you'll hear from Dr. Runyon, and I'll say, we're going to wrap that up. Thank you. And again, my intention here is not to be discourteous. What you have to say is very important to all of us. But I also want you to know that we are going to try to keep on track for you as well. You have a long week ahead of yourself. So, again, want to remember that. We'll start out with structured questions. We have 5 of those. And then we'll move from there into the questions after the break, which will be more free-flowing from the audience. And we appreciate their participation. Another piece I'd like to do before I go into the candidates' bios, we want to remind you that feedback is important. We want you to be relaxed. This is a process for you. On behalf of you, we again congratulate you for being finalists here this evening, and that's something worth celebrating. And so we do want to acknowledge that and to thank you. Out of 100 candidates, you are the 3 remaining, and that's something to be very proud of as well. So we appreciate that very much. At this time, I'm going to go through a couple of the bios here for each of our candidates so I can introduce them to our group that's gathered here this evening. Bill Kusan, again, is currently the interim chief of police for the city of Goodyear. He has served in that position since March 2011. He has over 16 years of experience providing public safety to the citizens of the city of Goodyear. The Goodyear Police Department is comprised of 128 employees. The city's population is approximately 67,000, and we have as of October 2011. Prior to serving as interim police chief, he has served as the police commander of field operations, a police lieutenant of field operations and support services, a police sergeant of field operations, and a police officer. So again, we thank you for your service. And Mr. Kusan holds a bachelor's degree of science in occupational education from Wayland Baptist University, and he's a 2009 graduate of the FBI National Academy. So welcome this evening again. Jerry Geyer, our second finalist. Mr. Geyer has 28 years in law enforcement. We'd also like to announce that he's currently the chief of police for the city of Yuma, Arizona. That agency has 165 sworn officers and 94 civilian positions, a population of just around 100,000 residents. Previously, he was director for the State of Florida Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco. He also served 23 years with other police agencies, including Butler County Sheriff's Office in Ohio, also in Florida as well, and the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Orlando. Columbia Southern University has a master's degree in criminal justice administration from 2005. Florida State University, a bachelor's degree in criminology, 1983 graduate. And he's also an FBI National Academy graduate. So welcome again as a finalist. Eric Haley, Mr. Haley has acquired 35-plus years career in the Phoenix Police Department. He has held a wide range of management assignments, including the 911 Communications Dispatch Officer, Patrol Operations, Property Crimes Investigations, Director of Arizona Law Enforcement Academy. He's also Liaison Commander to the City Manager and Administrative Commander in the Police Chief's Office and Police Operations at the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. He is currently the commander for the Airport Bureau and is responsible for local law enforcement services at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. He has a Master's of Science in Police Science and Administration from Northern Arizona University. He also has a Bachelor's of Science in Police Science and Administration from Northern Arizona. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy. We want to say welcome. Again, how about a hand for our candidates this evening? At this time, we're going to start the first round, and we are on schedule, so I appreciate that. Again, welcome. What we'll do with the questions, there are 5 questions. Each question will start on this side, stage left, I believe that is, and you'll answer first, second, third. The second question will start in the middle, and we'll go through a rotation. Again, remember you have 3 minutes for the structured questions, and after 2 minutes, the yellow card will be up. And I won't interrupt, but if you are running long, I'll have to just remind you to wrap up. And again, I apologize for that. I know these are very important things you're going to be sharing. So good luck to each of you, and thank you for being here. Question number 1, and we'll start on this end again. Candidates, please just take an additional few minutes to summarize your professional history and or highlight your career issues that have been successful that you think would be noteworthy for the audience tonight. So we'll start again at this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay, good. My name is Bill Cousin. I have served the community of Goodyear for over 16 years. I have held every rank within the police department. I have been tasked with, over the last 8 months, as your interim chief of police. And to speak of highlights of my career, and most ones that are most memorable, would be March of this year when I was given the opportunity to take this position. Came with such an honor, and was probably my proudest moment. I have, over the years, been very involved in the community. I, as a matter of fact, was one of the pioneers of our community action team. I think we still have 2 members of our department who are still with us, who are part of that team, who we started to get involved in the community, teaching block watches, reaching out to our young people in the schools. I did that about the first 2 years as I was an officer. By the year 5, I was promoted to sergeant around 2000. I spent the majority of my time there in field operations. I was also one of the founding members of our SAU, our SWAT team, and still hold the commander position over our SWAT team today. Well, not necessarily. I had to give it to a lieutenant for the last 8 months, as it was something I had to get off of my plate. So I was as a lieutenant for many years. I served as in investigations. I served in patrol. In 2009, I was promoted to commander. September of. I continued in field operations, which was commanding most of our workforce, most of our uniformed personnel. And again, the most proudest and most memorable moment was when I was given the interim chief's job this year, March of.
Mr. Geyer?
Thank you. Just to reflect on my career a little bit, I started 28 years ago with a large police agency in the Orlando, Florida area, an agency of about 2,000 employees, large metropolitan area, and started on patrol, worked my way up, worked as a property crimes detective, worked as a sex crimes detective, homicide detective, worked in traffic assignments, worked in narcotic assignments. As I started moving into the supervisory roles, I commanded a tourist policing unit of 60 members that actually provide all the police services for the International Drive area, which is an area in Orlando that can have up to 100 or 200,000 visitors at any one time. We also had a team that actually did the enforcement inside Disney World. I commanded an internal affairs unit of 8 officers. I was also a liaison to a community board, which advisory board, which actually reviewed excessive force and police misconduct cases. I commanded a large traffic unit of about 65 employees that did all the traffic enforcement. Also had a large volunteer base of over 100 members that we used in various functions throughout the community. After I also was a commander of several investigation units as well as working in them. After leaving that agency, a new sheriff was elected at an agency just south of Orlando, a county of 210,000 people, an agency of 450 people called the Osceola County Sheriff's Office. New sheriff was elected, approached me. I didn't know him, asked me if I would come down and be his enforcement bureau chief, which was his 3rd/4th ranking guy. Went down there, spent 4 years down there turning the agency around, bringing it to the future, preparing it and actually getting it accredited, just redoing all the policies, procedures, and practices in that agency. Ended up going to Ohio for a couple years as a major with a large police agencies in Ohio. Came back, realized I had 2.5 years left in Florida to get my retirement. Came back to Florida with the state agency as a major, became chief of law enforcement, was appointed by the governor as director of that statewide agency. And then when I retired in Florida, I came to Yuma. And I've been in Yuma just shy of 3 years. Took an agency that had a 25-year chief. The agency was stagnant. The previous chief was a great guy, but even said, Jerry, it's stagnant. I can't do anything. I've been here too long. And been very successful in turning that agency around, reorganized, started many different programs that the agency didn't have, improved morale, did severe budget cuts, in the last couple of years and still maintain the morale, motivation.
You have about
and,
10 seconds.
Have moved that agency forward to be a model agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Eric Haley, and I'm currently a Phoenix Police Commander. I've been employed by the City of Phoenix for 35 years, and Dr. Runyon gave you an overview of where I've been and what I've done. But I believe, just thinking about it here for the last 5 minutes, the major contributions I've made to the Phoenix Police Department, and you consider that it is an agency of over 4,000 employees, that it is difficult to rise to the top, so to speak, but the chiefs and assistant chiefs and members of the executive staff have really not hesitated to ask me to complete projects that have an overall effect on the police department and sometimes an overall effect on the way the city does business. Highlights to increase minority numbers. We developed, and I'm going to say we, I was the commander over Patrol Operations Bureau. We developed the cadet program where we lost a number of young people through the Explorer program. They turned 18. They couldn't be a law enforcement officer until they were 21. So we developed, designed, created the police cadet program, and we took the cream of the crop of the cadets and brought them into the police department as full-time employees with benefits. They could use their educational benefit to continue their education, but they were indoctrinated into the police department for a very smooth transition to become a law enforcement officer. I was the lead manager on developing what we call an emergency deployment plan. An officer was killed in the line of duty. A second officer was wounded. It was very chaotic, so we took the concepts of what we now call NIMS, the National Incident Management System, and I wrote the policy, the original policy, on how to manage that massive response of law enforcement, fire, and other city services to a tragic incident. I developed the discipline matrix. I believe it's a fair and equitable manner for the police chief to determine what level of discipline is appropriate for a sustained allegation of misconduct. I was instrumental in changing a number of policies and procedures with reference to transfers. Transfers are a huge issue in the organization because it's so big, and we had to shore up a couple issues. So that was given to me, and I worked with the unions on that, hand in hand, to develop that policy. I was a member of the Labor Management Committee for 6 years, participated in 3 negotiations with the officer unit on building their MOU and contract with the city, and worked day to day, sometimes minute to minute, with representatives of the unions as a representative of management. Participated when I was in policy and procedures on a CALEA reassessment or reaccreditation process. That was the third one that the City of Phoenix Police Department went through. I was the co-manager. I was responsible for over 250 files on that, and we passed we didn't miss one file. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. But back to my initial comment, the executive staff of the City of Phoenix Police Department has never hesitated to give me a project.
We have 10 seconds.
I believe I'm a very, very good administrator. That being said, 17 years as a uniformed officer, I can about do anything that is required of me. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 2, we'll start with Mr. Goodyear in the center. And again, there's 2 parts to this, so be sure to answer both. Please describe your philosophy on community engagement and community policing, and how will you measure your success?
Okay. Obviously, community policing and our community interaction is the key, in my opinion, is the key to success as a police agency, and the key to my success as a police chief. In all my agencies I've been with, and I'll talk particularly about Yuma, I've made community policing a priority. And to give you some examples of some programs in Yuma, and actually when I came in the Yuma agency, we were not well connected with the community. Some of the community policing programs that were in place had just fallen apart. And so I knew how important that was. So one of the first things, obviously, Yuma has a large Hispanic base. And we put together I appoint a Hispanic liaison to interact with the Hispanic community, get involved with the Hispanic media, and bring us closer to the Hispanic community, as there were a few trust issues. We had a Hispanic Citizens Academy, as well as our regular Citizens Academies. And these are some of the first, because I got calls from Tucson and other places throughout the state, actually through the Southwest United States, saying, hey, tell me about this Hispanic Citizens Academy you had. Tell me about this Hispanic liaison. How does that work? We did open houses at the police department. We've done a couple of them. Our neighborhood watch program had sort of fallen by the wayside. We've now rejuvenated that, and that's back in place and going strong. We have a crime-free multi-housing program with our rental apartment complexes, which is a certification program with these complexes. I revised the website, and I put a personal message from myself on trust and the different community policing things we're going to do with the community. And I even put an email link, which is sometimes dangerous, but I have an email link on my site and respond to emails from members of the communities all the time. We have GAIN events, such as you have here in Goodyear. I'm always a big Special Olympics person. And when I first came to Yuma, I went to a Special Olympics meeting, and they gave a breakdown of all the agencies in the state that were part of the Special Olympics and donation amounts and where you stood. Yuma wasn't even in the top 66. So I went back to my agency and said, we're going to make Special Olympics a priority for last year, and that's what we did. And we did tip-a-cop events where officers go in and act as servers in restaurants. We did a polar plunge in the freezing waters of Yuma. The mayor, the city manager, and myself all jumped in an ice-filled pool, and we did many events like that. And actually, the totals that just came out, we were ranked 6th in the state as far as our donations for last year. A huge improvement. We had a graffiti issue, and I put a program called Tags into place, which is basically, it stands for the Anti-Graffiti Strategy. It was the mayor and police chief's initiative on graffiti. And we got a great graffiti abatement program. Graffiti's gone within 24 hours in most cases. It's a joint operation between police department and Parks and Rec. One of the biggest things in the community I did that the community appreciates the most is I put a prescription drug drop box in the lobby of our police department, and got a mailbox painted up with Yuma PD logo and everything, put it in the lobby, and the community loves it. They bring their unwanted prescription drugs, drop them off. We destroy them. It is a little cost to the police department, but it's a huge thing for the community, and the people just love it. So the bottom line is, these are just a few of the programs that I've been able to implement in Yuma. I have the ability to take community policing to the next level here in Goodyear if selected for this position. And the success is measured by input from the community. And I'm constantly talking with community members and hearing feedback from them and city members, and that's how I gauge how my community policing programs are working. We have a great relationship with both the Hispanic community and the community of Yuma. Thank you.
Mr. Haley.
Thank you very much, Doctor. My philosophy of the community-based policing philosophy, I've gone through a transition. When I first joined the police service, we were the police. We knew best. We didn't have to ask the community or any other form of government or any other person how to do our job. We just did it. And the community, whether they liked it or not, that was just tough. But of course, over the last 35 years, the community-based policing philosophy has it's taken over policing. It is a transition from we're the police to we are the police. We cannot do policing alone. So my philosophy is that what is the vision? What is the community's vision? What is the mayor and the council's vision? What is the city manager's vision? What is the police department's vision of what community-based policing is? And you build buy-in. You build buy-in with doing successful programs. That program may be community-specific. It could be street-specific. It could be the whole general community-specific. So once you establish that, and using a common term, buy-in, you can formulate plans on how to deploy police officers, in what manner you deploy police officers. I love the term get away from 911. That term is, to me, is a police officer sitting in a police vehicle waiting for a call to be dispatched. My philosophy is getting those officers into the neighborhoods on bicycles, on foot. If you happen to be in Flagstaff and you're downtown, what do you see? You see an officer on foot walking in Flagstaff in his uniform, in her uniform. She's available. So openness of the police department and the police chief. I was asked the question today, if you are selected to be the police chief, will you have an open philosophy with the news media? And I said, well, yes, within the confines of active police investigations. I'm not going to tell the news media or the reporter who is under investigation for crimes when they haven't been charged. But yes, what the police department is doing to target a specific issue. Is it an issue that, a comment from a citizen tonight, that Pebble Creek rarely sees a patrol cruiser? Is that because it's a gated community and there's a thought that that's gated, it's walled, they don't need our service? They do. There are issues in every single neighborhood. We can't do it alone. You have to engage the community, and the community is everyone. Once again, the police department, could be the fire department, could be public works. It's an entity of the elected officials, the executives, the community leaders, and just the community. I've walked out on playgrounds when I was the temporary commander at Mountain View Precinct. There was an issue in a neighborhood. I drove out. I walked around. I went out to the playground, talked to grandparents with their children. What's the most important issue to you today? The apartments on the other side of 19th Avenue. I can deal with that. I have the resources. I have the wherewithal. I have the budget to use a team of officers to go in there under the color of law. Don't, I'm the first one to say, do not shortchange the judicial system. Don't take shortcuts. Do it the right way the first time. That leads to successful prosecutions, successful enforcement programs. How do you measure it? Ask the community, survey the community, ask the community, go out and meet with the local Kiwanis Lions Club, local business owners, find out what their most important issue is. If you've done a program, tell them. Constant statistical review is the key to successful programs. Thank you.
Mr. Kusan.
Thank you. My philosophy on community engagement, community-based policing, I believe starts the moment that an officer comes out of the academy and puts the uniform on. I think that our community needs to be engaged right away in a positive manner. Community policing, I think, has been going on for many, many, many years, and I think now we have just put a title to it, probably in the 90s. And our officers, if you haven't heard about the steel cocoon, I think that's what we were accused of being in the steel cocoon, officers driving around in patrol cars with their windows rolled up, air conditioning on. Some had radios, and listening to the radio and really not engaging the community. Well, what we're trying to tell our people now is roll down your windows, get out of the cars, and to pair it off with what the other candidate said, go out into the playgrounds, talk to the kids, see what's going on, because it's not only about community policing and meeting and partnering with the community, but you can get quite a bit of intelligence from a 6-year-old on a playground. Like he alluded to, there's a problem over there. I see this issue going on with this hand-to-hand action. I'm not really sure what that is. But it's an intelligence gathering measure and method for us. So I think it started a long time ago, and I think we've just put a name to it now. Some of the community programs, community relations programs that we're currently doing today, which I'm an advocate of, is we have over 80 block watch captains throughout the city, a few of which are here tonight. We have a very successful game program, getting Arizona involved in neighborhoods. We have a new program that I just spoke to our neighborhood response unit tonight, as a matter of fact, about it, and it's going to be called Business Watch. And it's sort of like Block Watch, but what we want to do is engage our businesses, too, and pass on information to our businesses about what's going on in your area, and allow them to network with one another, perhaps by a Twitter or Facebook page or something like that, some media connection that we can get this information out to them. I'm proud to say that we have 5 businesses that have come on board. and we're going to expand that program, because I think it's not only about our residents and community-based policing, but it's also about our businesses and how we interact with our businesses in a positive manner to let them know that they have the support of the police department and we care about displacing and dispersing criminal activity. So we are starting that program. Some of the other things that some of the candidates mentioned, we too are also doing here in the city of Goodyear already, VIN sketching, things of that nature. We have continued to have an SRO program, which I think is a community-based program. We have uniformed officers in our schools, which I think is important to reach our young people at a very young age. Again, be a positive role model, be on campus, be that friendly face. You wouldn't believe how many calls for service that are generated from a juvenile or a friend or a counselor or a teacher engaging the student and seeing what's going on, and that student reporting to our officer on campus. It's such an important relationship. So we have built a very good school resource officer program, and we'll continue to have that program as long as I'm here. Lastly, just a couple of things, because I did see the card come up. We have several other community outreach programs that are going on here. One of which I attended just about 3 weeks ago, and I met all the unit reps at Pebble Creek. I was invited one of our council members to engage them, and they too now have started a block watch program within the confines of a fenced community, which is important to them. And they had some concerns. They had some questions for me. But it's about getting out in front of the public. It's about finding out what their needs are, how we can create a positive working relationship and a partnership
10 seconds.
with the community that ultimately will assist us in doing our jobs. Because you've heard the adage that we cannot have an officer on every street corner. It's impossible. However, with the cooperation of our community, we sure can do our best to displace crime.
Thank you. At this time, question 3, we will begin with Mr. Haley. Based on your knowledge of the Goodyear Police Department and your professional experience, what steps will you take to build trust with the community?
Well, I sincerely believe that the police chief position is the position to be the steward for the department in every way. It should be not the public information officer, but it should be the guiding voice of the police department. And I think a commitment to the community is warranted, and I'm sure that all 3 candidates will give that commitment to the community. But me personally is that I've read the Citygate report, and evaluating that data from there, I came away with the impression that, yes, the department did suffer some trust issues, but overall, in general, the 2010 Goodyear survey and the comments from the Citygate report said that trust was not completely lost in the police department. So how do I build? Being the steward of the police department, it is a requirement that I build bridges with the community, with the mayor and council, with city management, with the business owners of the community, with the residents of the community. And this is quite a, when you think about Goodyear, when you think about Estrella is out on an island. I mean, it is a long way from here. And do the residents of Estrella feel that they are isolated from the heart of Goodyear? Hopefully not. And through going to community meetings in Estrella, Pebble Creek, Palm Valley, Test Drive Road, going out and talking turkey with used car salesmen and new car salesmen, that could be a tough sell to build trust in the city. I think that through leadership, through training, and I'm not talking about how to respond on a call training. I'm talking about how to talk to people training, how to conduct a professional traffic stop training, how to provide civil treatment for your coworkers. Those things build on professionalism and ethics and working hard to make the police department become trusted in the community. And You know, you think you really drill down on some of these things that people don't associate with the police, and that is attracting new businesses to your community. It's a huge part of that process. So I think that being the person, the go-to person, and I like the idea of social networking. I like the idea of providing web-type services, statements from the police chief that the Goodyear residents can watch. And I noted in the survey that 75% of the residents of Goodyear use the website. That's phenomenal. That is a phenomenal thing. And I'm going to say it's free. That's a free service provided to every single resident in the community. And I certainly hope that the police department has a link to where a statement, a videoed statement, weekly, bi-weekly, maybe monthly, on what's going on in the organization, what's in the strategic plan, what are we working on today, what do we want to work on tomorrow, and what do we want to work on next year, and how we're going about getting there. So I feel that's very, very important. Bringing the walls down, that is the best way to build trust from your community to the police department. Because you have to remember that most contacts with police are somewhat negative. You've been the victim of a crime. You're getting a traffic citation, or you're going off to jail. So you have to temper that, and that's how you build trust. Thank you.
This time we'll move to Mr. Kusan.
Thank you. Building trust with the community. Well, I think the first thing you need to do is you need to send a very powerful message to the community that the person that you have in charge of your police department is one of the highest ethical values and has the highest integrity, and is absolutely working for them and in the best interest of the community, those we serve, those who are paying our salaries. And that having lived through Citygate, I can share with you that we are moving through the Citygate recommendations. I have provided city management and council a quarterly report on where we're at with the recommendations, and the next report is due January 1st. And I too share that some of the recommendations that Citygate had offered are going to take some time to implement. Some of them were very heavy in human resources, and we had to wait for a director to get on board to start to tackle those issues. But I think that's how you gain the trust in the community. 8 months ago, they looked upon this police department and they said, well, who's going to lead this group? And I think that I can speak very firmly and confidently and tell you that every news article I've read, every manager I've spoken to, every council member I've spoken to, every officer, and every member of the police department has said, you're doing a phenomenal job. And what better way to build trust in the community than having the top guy be the guy that holds the torch and has the highest of ethical values and integrity to move this department in the right direction. I have done that. And yeah, we did hit a bump in the road, but it was only a bump in the road. This department is filled with excellent employees. It only takes a couple of employees to skew the opinions of the public, and I understand that. I get that. However, the majority of our officers are exceptional at what they do. So, yeah, getting the trust back in the community is still an uphill battle, and I understand that it's going to take some time. It takes time for the culture to change. It takes time for us to get practices and procedures in place. Some of the things that I've done is I too have created a professional standards matrix to which I adopted back in August. We've been living by that matrix to help the employee and to help the supervisors understand, what could happen if you do this. It's sort of a measure. Now, understanding that there are some mitigating and aggravating circumstances to each of those offenses. However, it gives people a guide, and that's where the trust and the belief in the police department may have gone awry. Is the community may not have been feeling that, and I sense a change. I sense a change in the way the community is feeling about the police department under new direction and under my leadership.
Thank you. And Mr. Geiler.
Actually, I've been with agencies before where there were trust issues, and I had to work at rebuilding those trust issues. And obviously, the first thing we've already heard, you need a chief with integrity and ethics. It's the most important thing, and that message has to get out to the community. Website is a great way. Again, in Yuma, I've got a message on the website of trust, and that's something that needs to get out to the public. For a chief to come in and set the tone, set the vision, work with the media, and again, get the message out there to the public about trust. You need to get the message of integrity and professionalism out in your agency. Again, we've also heard we've already heard about disciplinary policies. Again, I've had oversight of discipline in multiple agencies, instituted new discipline policies in my current agency to promote accountability, fairness, and consistency, and it's very important. You need a visible chief. You need a chief that's going to attend events. I go to chamber events. I'm very visible in the public. I do parades and different events in the community. I'm a member of Rotary. Spreading that message by being visible in the community is important. Attending community meetings and neighborhood watch meetings and other functions, as we just talked about. Training for officers, you've already heard this too, on integrity and ethics and moral issues and how to handle certain types of things. Increase transparency in the agency, and that's what people in the community are looking for, an agency in the city that's transparent. Improve communications externally and internally. I've put programs in place in my current agency. An agency that didn't have a good flow of communications now has a great communication that flows up and down and throughout the city. Updates to the community as you go along, meaning for a new chief to do, I've been in office three months now, and here's some of the things the agency's done, and here's what we're doing for trust. Again, updates on the website, and I've also read all the Citygate data, and I agree, trust is not lost. It just needs rebuilt a little bit. So those are a few of the things I've selected for this position. So.
Thank you. Question 4, we'll start stage left again with Mr. Kusan, and it's describe your vision for the Goodyear Police Department. Where will you take us in 5 years from now, and how will you prepare this department for the city's potential population growth from its current population to a population of, say, 120 to 200,000?
Thank you. My vision for the police department, I said to our police department panel earlier, and it's very simple, but it's this. I want to provide the community of Goodyear with the most professional and well-trained police officers in the valley. That is my vision. And the question is how do we get there? Well, we've already begun to get there. And it says here, where will you take us in 5 years from now? What is that going to look like? Well, I've already put in place some things that are going to get us there. I have partnered with Lexipol LLC out of California, who is just a terrific company on risk and liability and lowering risk and liability for police agencies. Where I have a staff, a committee that's already working with their representatives to make that happen for us, which is very exciting. They're going to provide us with policies and procedures that are based on recent court decisions, best practices, and a blend of our policies and procedures with theirs. But that's not all. We also, with them, are going to get what's called a daily training bulletin. And what that is our officers, when they go in service on their MDCs, they will go to that website every single day, and it's recorded, and they will ask a policy-driven question every single day that they get in their car. And it's not how many right or wrong you get, but if you get the answer wrong, you have to select another answer. And the philosophy is that, you know, every day is a training day for your staff, and make it happen that way. They will give questions on use of force, on driving, all those high liability areas, which are most crucial to our position. And what's exciting about it is they track that. We can generate a report that'll tell us, you know, how many officers did not take it. The officers would be required to take 4 a week. Right now, our officers work 4 10s. So that's very, very exciting to us. And that's just the beginning. I'm also looking into accreditation for our agency. CLIA will be holding their next conference in Scottsdale in July. and I plan on attending that one. We're fortunate I don't have to travel out of state, so I don't have to get everything signed by the city manager to do so. So I will be able to attend that, and I'm very interested in CLIA accreditation. What does that do for a police department in the city? Well, if I'm a new resident or I'm a business owner, and I'm coming in and I'm looking at opening a business or buying a house, I'm going to look at those things. Is that an accredited agency? Are they partners with Lexipol? What is their driving force? How are they managing their people? What measures do they have in place? Well, accreditation is a great opportunity for that. And I know it might be a long way out, but even if we don't get that stamp of accreditation approval, we still can adopt a lot of those policies that are CLIA approved. And it's so important to our mission and to our community. I know that's what I would look for if I was a business, so they CLIA a certified agency. I think it's very promising, and it assists with the economic development of our community. That's okay. Next question is how will you prepare this department to see potential growth population of 120 to 200,000? What we have to do is continually have what we do now is a 5-year strategic plan or a business plan. We have to always plan out. And I'm a firm believer in looking at a business plan, developing a staffing plan that's going to meet the percentage of population growth coupled with your calls for service and your criminal activity in the city. I think it's all combined. And that would be my measure and how I would get us to that population. That's what I would use closely, is a strategic plan that would measure our population growth and our criminal activity.
Seconds.
So I'll just end with that.
We'll move to the center and Mr. Geiler.
Actually, my vision for the Goodyear Police Department would be to continue to evolve into a professional agency, committed to the community, continue to build trust, and reduce crime. And the bottom line is, the Goodyear Police Department is a good agency. It can be a great agency and a model agency. Sort of how I would go about that and how I would prepare, obviously more community interaction and community policing programs. The community is our eyes and ears, can't do it without the community, so more interaction there. Again, strategic plans, looking at growth, looking at population estimates, calls for service crime, more cops. I mean, you go from a population of where we are now to, well over 100,000. More cops may come to that, but we have, an economic downturn and we have funding issues. So you need to aggressively look at grants and look for different funding opportunities to hire police officers. Again, as the population increases, you have more opportunity for crime. You need to have aggressive investigation of crime, aggressive prosecution. You need to look at things like gang enforcement, narcotics enforcement, and make sure you are protecting the community and taking care of that criminal activity. So that's sort of where I see the agency going, and I forgot one point, and I had this down before you went. The whole accreditation aspect too. Actually, I was just over the past 3 years, I prepared the Yuma Police Department for accreditation, and actually just got through implementing 160 new policies. That's taken about a year to do, that already meet accreditation standards. They are model policies. And I looked at best practices. I looked at some of the Valley agencies, Chandler's, the Peorias, some of the agencies that are accredited, and basically, our policies are a model of theirs. So they're good, they're correct, and they do meet the standards. And I was just at an accreditation conference in Colorado Springs 2 weeks ago. And, that's somewhere that the Yuma Police Department can go, and that's a huge accomplishment. But that's sort of my vision and how we would get there.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
Thank you very much. Well, we've talked about a number of things. I did mention that I did an accreditation process for Phoenix Police Department with CALEA, so I'll leave that part out. But my vision is that you have to build a strategic plan, and you have to build a long-term plan. And what's in that plan? You have to focus on crime. Of course, that's what we're in the business to do, is to suppress crime, to investigate criminal activity. So you have to put procedures in place to support that mission. I think the next one is continual improvement. You have to focus as the chief on how do you get your organization to continually improve, using new methods, research new methods, use the community-based policing gurus out there, and there are many of them throughout the United States, use their philosophies and incorporate those into your own agency. Build trust. We've talked about how to build trust and the other questions. Trust within the organization, trust between city management and the department, trust between the community and the department. That's huge. And then fiscal responsibility. You have to place limits on things. Sometimes you just have to say no, but you build a strategic plan. And then through leadership, and I think there's just, I use 3 very simple, basic tenets of leadership. The first one is hard work. You have to work hard to be successful. Everyone in this room knows that. You have to be ethical, and you have to be professional. And if you build on those 3 tenets with communication, collaboration, and consistency, it'll support the strategic plan. You also have to work on a capital improvement program. You have to have buildings. You have to have equipment. So those are the things that prepare you for these rapid processes of growth, and you have to be prepared for that. So you just can't think, well, how many people are going to move to Goodyear next year and the next year, and what am I going to need the next year and the next year? You have to build this out 5 years, maybe even 10 years. So I think that's critical. And then the third thing that I'd like to talk about is training and career development from within the organization. And it might sound kind of goofy that I would say this, but I am not a strong proponent of advertising for police lieutenant positions valley-wide or police commander positions valley-wide. From my understanding of the Goodyear Police Department, there is a wealth of institutional knowledge, experience, well-educated, ethical, professional individuals that if they choose a path of supervision and management and maybe executive management in the future, it is my role as the chief to garner that and to build that within the organization. So, working with city staff, planning, zoning, council, the mayor's office, city manager's office, you can prepare for growth, but you can't let it slip. You have to always be on top of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final structured question for this evening, we'll start in the center, again with Mr. Geiler, and we'll move from there. The last question for the structured session before our break is, tell us about a recent opportunity you seized to bring diverse community groups together to work on something important.
Thank you. And actually, I'll have to go back to my relationships with the Hispanic community. And actually, I'm going to leave Yuma and go back to another position in Central Florida I had, which happened to be the fastest growing Hispanic community in the United States when I was there, a county of over 200,000. And when I assumed my role, we had serious trust issues with the Hispanic community. And the first thing we did, and obviously I knew that was part of the key to the success of our administration, is having those relationships. So again, I put a Hispanic liaison in place and had that person reach out to the Hispanic community. We developed a great relationship with the Hispanic media. We had a Hispanic newspaper. We had Hispanic television, cable TV programs. And the police department was constantly in the news for good things and are working together and our cooperation. We had, again, a Hispanic Citizens Academy, which, again, helped us develop a great relationship. We brought forums in Spanish. We brought a Spanish class for police officers into the agency. We did all these things to better connect with the Hispanic community. We had a town hall meeting to kick it all off and basically had discussions on how we could work better together. So, and that's similar to the same type of issues I had in Yuma, not to that extreme, but those are some of the similar measures that I took to develop a great relationship with our diverse Hispanic community. Thank you.
Mr. Haley.
Thank you, Dr. Runyon. I'm going to talk on this issue about the City of Phoenix Capital Improvement Program in 2006. I know it's somewhat dated, but this is a huge undertaking. And you talk about diverse groups. You have passionate people about public safety, arts, streets, maybe, passionate people about sewage, fire, you name it. Everyone has an issue. And so I was asked by the Chief of Police to coordinate the police department's capital improvement program for a citywide vote. That's $120 million. I believe it was 16 projects. And I coordinated 8 community meetings, 2 city tours. I did all the so-called grunt work, contacted all the community leaders, brought them together who were interested in these public meetings. And what I had to do was I had to design a presentation that would convince the voters that these 16 projects, and we're talking buying helicopters and airplanes, new radio systems, in-car systems, major purchases, our report writing system, that all needed to be replaced, 2 new precinct stations, those type of things, that they were important, or as important as your passion. So we were very successful on that, overwhelming vote of approval by the voters of the City of Phoenix, and I'm quite proud to say that I was the lead on that. There was a spokesperson for the department. It was the Executive Assistant Police Chief, but I provided him with all the information. I provided the committee that represented the police department, chaired by a former Arizona legislator and co-chaired by a longtime businessman here in the community, did all the work for them. So that was very successful, and we are reaping the benefits of that today. We've just opened 2 new precincts. We have a new airplane, helicopters, and it's slowly coming together, even through these bad economic times. But I'm very proud of that, and that was one of my major contributions to the City of Phoenix and to the police department.
Mr. Kassan.
Thank you. The most recent event that I can recall, where there were 2 diverse community groups, and I wasn't necessarily the head of the spear, so to speak, on this issue. What was an issue that we were having down south regarding our cattlemen group and our farmers, which are 2 diverse groups in the community, which were at issue. And I'd like to say that my contribution to that issue was basically to gather up as much data and information that I could on the issue regarding vehicle cattle accidents to city management and to city council, to keep them as informed and up to date with all the data that we have, so they could make an informed decision on how to proceed with that issue. That was probably the most recent opportunity that I had, and I felt it was important. I mean, it took 3 or 4 months for us to get past that issue. It had so many facets to it, and the people that on both sides and both parties were very passionate about their points of view. And our council, our police department, our city management were very understanding and trying to come to some compromise with both groups. And for our city, it was a pretty hot topic for quite a while. So my contribution to that effort to find resolution was to give our city management, again, and our city council as much information as we could and as much data as we could regarding the issue down there, so they could make their informed decision on how they were going to proceed.
Thank you. How about a hand? They've completed the first round. Congratulations. At this time, a couple updates for you for the beginning of the second round. We're going to have a 15-minute break. We're right on schedule. We appreciate that, and we appreciate everybody's involvement with that process. We're going to have our candidates in just a minute exit through that door. They will not be here during the break period. If you do have questions, we'd appreciate if you could get those to the city officials, that it will be available here walking around in about the first 5 minutes of the break, so because they have to take those and then put them by category, by topic, by subject. We scheduled with our time, we should be able to answer about 10 to 11 questions. So that may require some combining of questions based on if they're very similar. We are going to ask the candidates, depending on the number of questions we can get in, we might move to a 2-minute format if that'll be okay with the candidates, which would help us to get more questions if that's needed. We also want to remind the candidates, you will each have 1 minute for a closing remark. And again, we will go left to right with that. We'll start for the closing remark across. We'll rotate the questions as they come up. And again, we want to thank you for being here this evening, and thank you for the excellent job you just did, all three of you. Wonderful. At this time, if you could exit through that door, you'll have a nice 10 to 15-minute break. Thank you again.
that's okay. An L worked its way in there somehow.
Yeah, sorry about
One that Mario got.
So you had it written out well, G-E-Y.
Yeah, I have it right
So-
here. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay, at this time we're going to reconvene to stay on schedule. Thank you again, everyone. Okay, we've got it to, we have approximately 15 questions. We believe with the time allotted, we'll be able to get through the 15 questions. Again, we appreciate, again, from the community standpoint, your participation tonight in these questions. We will not be able to do follow-up questions, so again, I want to remind you and thank you for your understanding and participation in this process so that we can get through this successfully. We'll be moving to 2 minutes per question for the candidates to answer, and we'll just go once the yellow card comes up. We'll use that as the 10-second rule. Also, I did want to make one small correction. I apologize. We have 2 minutes for each of you to have your closing statement, not one. So I just want to make sure we honor that as the schedule outlines. So at this time, we'll get started. Again, I haven't read these personally, and I appreciate everyone who collected them, but we'll just start. We're going to, let me look at my schedule here. Hold on. For this process, we'll reverse our order, so we'll start on the far end with Mr. Haley and work back for the first question and just reverse that process. So, Mr. Haley, at this time, you'll have the first question. Again, each of you will have a chance to answer the question. So, thank you again. In your current position, what major changes have you implemented, and what was the outcome of the operation, as well as impact on morale? I'll read that again. In your current position, what major changes have you implemented, and what was the outcome of the operation, as well as morale for your folks?
Well, the major one is the reduction of the budget. Through tough budgetary times, all the middle managers and execs in the city of Phoenix were asked to reduce their budgets by 5%. So when I start with $19 million, roughly you're going to have to eliminate $1 million. And really the only way to do that, because this day and age with about 94% of your expense on personnel, you're going to have to reduce it with personnel, and you have to target overtime. So with rescheduling, and the city did send 12 more officers to the airport to supplement the 88 officers we had there at the time. I was able, through reworking the schedule, changing a couple policies, reduce the budget by $1.8 million. So I almost saved a little bit over 9%. It had an adverse effect on morale, but these are very, very tough times, and we all have to make sacrifices. So there had to be a lot of communication between me through the second-level supervisors and first-line supervisors to the officers, because their pocketbooks were affected. We're rebuilding that slowly. Dollars are being added to the budget, but that was a huge hit, and yes, morale did take a hit, but having an open-door policy and willing to talk to people through these issues was very valuable.
Mr. Goodyear.
Okay. When I came to the Yuma Police Department, the agency needed significant change. It was stagnant. It was unproductive. Morale was not good. And as we spoke before, there was things like no narcotics enforcement here in a community that's almost, well, it is a border community basically. So established a narcotics unit. Our training was really lacking. Other than shooting firearms, we didn't do much training. I started a training unit, and we made training a priority. Now we train every 2 weeks. We have a patrol schedule that allows training every 2 weeks for all the officers, and they get training in high liability areas and pursuit driving and firearms, defensive tactics, everything. I put school programs in place. We had an SRO program, didn't have anything as far as the GREAT program, instituted a GREAT program, put 2 officers in the schools. We've talked about community policing and all the increases we made in our community policing activities. We had a hiring process that was less than desirable. I put a person as a liaison to human resources, got human resources from the city level involved in our hiring recruitment. We have a great relationship there now. Our gang unit, was not productive. Did some revisions in the gang unit. Now we have a very proactive gang unit. And again, as was mentioned already, had significant cuts in my agency. 2 years ago, I had to cut out $2 million. Last year, I had to cut out $2 million, which is about 10% each year. And so we had an impact there. I lost 18 positions. 10 the city froze, 8 through reorganization. And one of the things I'll hit on real quick because I'm running out of time, I put a communication plan in place.
10 seconds.
That has, I don't want time to talk about it, but communication plan that really improved morale and motivation, and I have a very motivated agency now that does a great job.
Mr. Kusan.
Thank you. What changes have I made? I think I would probably need more than 2 minutes to share with you this, but I'll keep it brief. Probably one of the biggest changes that helped with morale in the police department was the development of our professional standards policy. And we absolutely needed that at the time. There was a cooperative effort, which we worked with our labor force, our executive staff, our legal department, to make sure it was a very comprehensive policy and procedure that was easy to understand. So that was probably one of the biggest major changes that we made. Also, communication, and to talk about what the other candidate did, there was a sense of lack of communication in the department, particularly from our executive level to our officers and sergeants. So what I did was I removed our patrol lieutenants from our Veneta building, our main headquarters where all the administrative staff is at, and I relocated them to the patrol building, which is a different building down near Western Avenue on Litchfield Road, which absolutely increased communication in the organization, which had a very positive impact on morale. The lieutenants now were with their working groups. They were able to observe. They were able to attend briefings. They were able to be closer to their sergeants. So those two were probably the two biggest changes that I made directly upon taking my interimship here 8 months ago. The last one is the increased morale, especially in the executive staff, is I immediately invested in the development of their leadership training. I sent 3 of my staff to leadership and patrol, leadership and police organizations training right away to get them trained, which absolutely increased morale at the executive level to demonstrate to them that I am committed to their development as well.
Thank you. The second question, we'll start in the middle with Mr. Goodyear. What is your philosophy on internal communications, and how will you implement it in the department? Your philosophy on internal communications and how you will implement it in the department.
Okay, good. I couldn't talk about it last time, but I can talk about it now.
Fits.
When I went to Yuma, we had a situation where communications didn't flow up, they didn't flow down. It was pretty stagnant. And you had situations where if you were a sergeant, you didn't talk to a captain. It was just not the way it worked. It was so structured. And so I put a communication plan in place. And first of all, and just keep in mind that I replaced a 25-year chief who was very set in his way, great guy, but very set in his way of doing things. So when I came in and I started sending emails out to my agency about here's our vision, here's our direction, here's how we're going to get there, here's where we're going to go, that was something new to them. So the fact that you have a chief that sends out emails and communicates with the agency was very accepted by the agency. Again, I communicate with the public. We revise the website. I do have an email link on there and constantly communicate with the public on that. I implemented you might want to call it a less than paramilitary structure. And what that means is that I'm open for recommendations and suggestions for anybody in the agency. And that was a culture through the chain of command that I had to change. And I told my staff, I said, officers and employees are going to be able to come to me with recommendations and suggestions on ways to improve the agency. And they do. And I started an open door meeting, and I block out, I've done about 10 of them now, I block out a day from my schedule about every 6 weeks. I have an open door meeting. And it's come in, talk about anything you want to talk about, talk to the chief. And the first day I had one, line was all the way down the hall. And but it was nothing but good stuff. and people were so excited to get the chance to come in and talk to the chief. And
10
you know,
seconds.
that's been very successful. My open communication and transparency has really increased morale in the agency, and it's been a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Kusan.
Thank you. Internal communication within the police department today has increased drastically. Like I alluded to before, the first issue was sending our patrol lieutenants to where they could get a better read on what their people were doing and a better, closer working relationship with them. Some of the other things that we've instituted also are our one-on-one meetings with our managers and our supervisors and their direct reports. Those happen weekly, and they're documented. So every week, those supervisors are meeting with their direct reports once a week to just talk about what's going on, to make sure that they're on course to achieve their objectives for their yearly performance evaluations, things of that nature, coaching opportunity, and mentoring opportunity for them as well. I also am an advocate of reaching out to our employees, sending them a message. Our command staff is constantly sending messages down to our lieutenants, to sergeants, to our officers to ensure that they are up to date on everything that's going on in the organization. It's very, very effective. We also have weekly staff meetings that our executive staff gets together, and we discuss current events. What's going on this week? What's happening? What have you heard? What changes do we need to make? What issues are on the horizon, which we have found to be very, very beneficial. I also, when I was a commander, I instituted our mid-managers weekly meeting, so it's the lieutenant, the commander meeting with his lieutenants and telecommunications manager every week, and they too have an opportunity in a smaller group to talk about what's going on specifically in field operations. So there's all sorts of communication methods that are occurring within the police department now, and I think our communication up and down the ladder is probably better today than it has ever been.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
My philosophy of internal communications is to be, first of all, trustworthy, to provide accurate information, and if I'm not really, I shouldn't give information, then I'm going to say so. I'm sorry I can't share that with you now. Being open, of course, you've heard that from the other candidates, but I insist that direct reports have access to their supervisor, and I'm glad to hear that the department is doing a weekly supervisor direct report discussion of performance, positive or negative, but it goes beyond that. You have to have weekly staff meetings. You have to include your command staff. You also, as the chief, have to go down and have an officer meeting, a specific officer meeting, no one else in the room. Bring those officers in and ask them, poll your squad mates, poll everybody that you work with, give me some issues. If you have a solution, that's even better. But let's talk about it. It could be an issue that I don't know anything about. So deal with it. Deal it out. Talk to the other staff. Discuss it with the supervisors. A lot of communication now over the web. You can create weekly videos that are used by the internal folks, what's going on. There is a thing that you have to watch out for, and that's filtering. Is the information that the chief wants the officers to hear getting to the officers? The best way for that to occur without filtering is to have the chief actually speak to the officers, to communicate with the officers openly, and that's attending briefings, attending squad meetings, attending investigation meetings, any of those type of things where you make yourself available. But there's a myriad of ways you can do that, and I'm sorry I didn't get into it in my 2 minutes.
Our third question this evening, we'll start with Mr. Kusan, and it's what is your experience in immigration issues?
The immigration issues. Well, it just so happens that when this was a very hot topic about two and a half years ago, I was tasked by then Chief Mark Brown to be the collector of 1070 issues and to look at how we're going to deal with this very broad and very serious issue. And it seemed that, by and large, a lot of departments and agencies, state, city, county, really didn't really know what to do and how to handle this. So my immigration experience is that I have all the data. We do have a practice in the police department that if we stop someone who we suspect may be here illegally, we have resources that we call to confirm their status, and we turn those individuals over to immigration. But I haven't. I still have my 1070 issue folder in hand with all the information. It's just been sort of set on the shelf the last little while after the bill was overturned and not put into action. So, but that is my experience with immigration.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
I was involved in part of development of changing the Phoenix Police Department's policy on immigration and the enforcement of illegal immigration, and quite frankly, I agreed with the direction that the department did go to in the end as a result of, this was pre-Senate Bill 1070, and that is that everyone is treated equally. You don't want to turn the community off. You don't want to put those people behind doors, windows, and walls to where they do not cooperate with the police if they have vital information to solve crimes. If they're involved in criminal activity, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, they are going to check immigration. If they are not, if they're involved in criminal activity, there may be a reasonable suspicion, and they have a history, and we can verify that, I have no objection to contacting ICE to see if they will detain the individual. But as the police chief, I think my role was to develop a relationship with the local director of ICE and talk to them about their policies and procedures. We can drive over to the ICE headquarters in Phoenix 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with individuals that may not be here legally. They're not going to open the gate. They're overworked and underpaid, so to speak. So I think a general philosophy of treating everyone the same, if they are involved in criminal activity and there's probable cause for an arrest, a booking is warranted. If they are on the fringe of criminal activity, maybe information to ICE for consideration.
10 seconds.
But I think that's a good way to go.
Mr. Goodyear.
Yeah, and actually being in Yuma, we do have quite an occasion to come across illegals. And, I've also implemented a policy in my agency. And, again, it's like you've heard already, it talks about being fair and treating people equal. But, there are several issues associated with immigration. And, there's a big debate on, is it a federal government responsibility, is it a local municipality responsibility or county responsibility? If you take a proactive stance on immigration, it affects your community policing. I want our crime victims to come forward. I want our domestic violence victims to come forward and report stuff to the police department. If you take a very proactive stance on immigration, that's going to be an issue because they won't want to come forward. I think it's a city decision. I think it's a decision on council and the mayor as to what is our city's stance on immigration going to be. And right now in Yuma, we come across illegals, we detain them, we call Border Patrol. We're fortunate because we're in a little different situation that we have Border Patrol agents all over the place, tripping over each other. So they respond very quickly, and we'll take our individuals that we have detained. But again, I think it's a city decision, and that there's pros and cons both ways to enforcing it, being proactive or not.
Thank you. Question 4, we'll begin with Mr. Haley again. Will you monitor use of time for employees? Will you monitor use of time for employees?
I wish I was the third person to answer this question.
It refers to their work time.
Yes. Of course, everyone has a certain time that they're supposed to report for work. And if they report consistently late, that becomes a disciplinary issue because the person that they're replacing has already been to work and wants to go home to enjoy family, friends, events. Yes, I'm pretty. This question has kind of stumped me a little bit. Absolutely, officers, when they're on the clock, should be working, and they should be working hard to provide quality policing service to the community. So yes, that's a supervisor's responsibility to ensure that people are here on time. They work their entire shifts for what they're being paid for. So yeah, it's one issue that the department would monitor.
Thank you. For Mr. Geyer, the same question.
I guess the answer is absolutely, and we want to be efficient and effective as possible, and we want to make sure our employees are working and that they come to work on time, that they're there, and that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I agree, it's a chain of command supervisory issue, and I would expect, like I would expect today, that any supervisor or manager that has an issue like this of somebody being tardy or somebody out wasting time or not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that may turn into a discipline issue, and that's something that's going to be brought forward so we can take care of that. But absolutely, we're going to have oversight over our employees' time and what they're doing.
Mr. Kusan.
I feel like I'm going to say everything that both of the other two candidates said, but yes, we're definitely monitoring our employees' activities while they're on duty, and they're being paid by taxpayer dollars is absolutely of importance to me. And how do we plan to do that? Well, there's several ways that we're doing it now. One of the ways that we can do it is through our computer data system, CAD, which will basically give a snapshot of the officer's day and what they do all day. Right now, the expectation or the average officer right now is spending about 29% of their time doing directed patrol in the community, and that is aside from their taking reports and doing administrative duties. So we kind of monitor the activity in that sense, but it's incumbent upon our supervisors to get a real good gauge on the activity of all of our employees and to make sure that they're using their time wisely. If there's a great distinction between, let's say, a squad of 6 and you have 5 of your squad members who are in that 29% free time to just roam and do directed patrol, and you have somebody else that has 80% of that same time, well, I think that would be maybe an issue that supervisor would want to look into and find out what that employee is really doing. So absolutely, it's incumbent upon our supervisors to monitor their activity.
Thank you. Our next question will start in the middle with Mr. Geyer. Patrol is the bread and butter of police departments. Have you been in charge of patrol, and at what level and for how long?
Absolutely. I worked in patrol, starting my law enforcement career for several years. As I moved up the ranks, I spent time as a sergeant, a first-line supervisor of patrol. And as I continued to move up the rank, as a lieutenant, I had oversight of patrol squads, many of them, and the same as a captain had oversight of patrol squads. In my different agencies, as a bureau chief, as an administrator, I have had oversight of patrol divisions and squads. And in my current agency, obviously I have a large patrol base, and I interact with them daily. I have sergeants and lieutenants and captains that run the day-to-day operation. As the chief, I provide the vision and the direction, and I am involved with them somewhat, but mostly in an oversight role. But I do get out there. I do my best to put a uniform on and go out when I get a chance and ride and go to calls and interact with them and attend briefings. So I've had significant supervisory experience, patrol experience, supervisory experience of patrol squads, and administrative oversight of patrol squads.
Mr. Kusan.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I sure can. Let me grab it here. Patrol is the bread and butter of police departments. Have you been in charge of a patrol, and at what level and for how long?
Yes, and I agree that patrol is truly the bread and butter of a police department, and I say that in the sense that they are the initial face of the police department when that officer arrives at your door. They are the representative of the police department. So yeah, they are the bread and butter. They are obviously the most visible, and I have extensive experience in patrol. I've lived most of my career in patrol. When I left as now the interim chief, before taking this position, I was the Field Operations Patrol Commander. I was a patrol lieutenant. I was a patrol sergeant. So yes, I've held every rank in patrol. I understand the patrol concepts. I understand how to best utilize our patrol officers to best serve our community, and it's something that I've been doing for years.
Thank you. And we go to Mr. Haley.
I think I may be mixing panels here, but I think I did indicate that the first 17 years I spent on the Phoenix Police Department were all in uniform patrol assignments. An officer, I was assigned to a number of different precincts, plus I provided foot patrol service in what they used to call the housing projects in Central and South Phoenix. Patrol sergeant. I also had a position as a precinct administrative sergeant and a precinct training sergeant. So I did a lot of the captain's work in support of the administrative function of the patrol precinct or the patrol officers, and also did coordinate all the training. My first position as a lieutenant was over a special squad of patrol officers assigned in the central part of Phoenix that provided patrol in downtown Phoenix, and then I was a patrol lieutenant in Maryville Precinct and the old Squaw Peak Precinct, which is now Mountain View Precinct. So I've done about every single thing that there is to do in patrol, other than ride a bike, because bikes were not available at the time when I was in patrol, but participated in block watch, gain, Arizona Night Out at the time, but all those type of community events at the schools, officer friendly, stranger danger, did all those functions as a patrol officer. And it is truly the backbone of policing. As the others have indicated, it is usually your first point of contact with a department, and that's why you've got to do uniform inspections. You've got to stay on top of that and make sure that these guys are presentable and look professional.
Thank you. At this time, we'll start on this end here, and we have Mr. Kusan, and the question is, how have you stayed within budget? How have you stayed within budget?
How have I stayed within budget? Well, budget's not over yet, but the two things that one of the most critical things that we look at in budget in the police department right now are training dollars and our overtime, and how we stay within the budgetary confinements of being fiscally responsible with that. And I would just like to talk about how we're dealing with our overtime budget, because that seems to be something that's most impactful, and try to stay, quote, within budget. It hasn't been easy. We've had to, when we get officers who are working overtime, coming in on their days off to cover shifts and so forth, we've had to allow them an opportunity at the end of the week to flex a day off, as to try to stay within budget. We have separated our budget out, and for the sake of only 2 minutes, I'll tell you that we have a field operations budget and an investigations budget. Both of those managers are responsible for their budget, and we meet monthly to talk about where we're at in budget. So how do I stay within budget? I monitor the patrol operations budget very closely. I monitor our second high user working group, which would be in our investigations division, to ensure that we're within budgetary restrictions or within the confines of what our allotment is. So that is pretty much how our budget is working today.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Haley, same question.
I always ask the question when I'm looking at my budget is does it support the strategic plan of whatever assignment I'm in? If it does not support the mission, then the expense is not going to be made. So information is critical. As the chief, you have to constantly monitor the budget, and it could be overtime for court. Is it a scheduling issue with court? Are the day shift officers being subpoenaed on their days off? The afternoon officers being subpoenaed in the morning? Sometimes those dockets can't be changed, but that's just one of the areas that you can monitor. Holdover time. Is that report critical to the organization to be completed that day on overtime, or can it wait for the next shift? I mean, if it's a theft or a burglary or a nonviolent crime where there's not an arrest or a suspect, it may be able to be held over. What I'm getting at is that constant monitoring, constant supervision, but the chief has to set the tone. If it's carte blanche, of course, overtime is the big expense. Personnel charges are the big costs are the big expense, because you can make a decision on whether I buy ink pens or pencils, and you can take your time with that. The other decisions are on staffing and overtime. Those are a little bit more tougher to make, and I would agree that investigations uses a lot of overtime because people don't go to bed at 10 o'clock like I do and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning like I do. They're out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, involved in criminal activity, and we need a response from guys that are not on duty. So constant monitoring.
10 seconds.
And you got to keep your eye on it.
Mr. Goodyear.
Okay, we're going to wear the monitoring word out, but there's no easy way to say it. Again, it comes to monitoring the budget, and as a chief, you've got to do that. And I know that about 70% of my budget goes to salary and benefits, and obviously the rest is overtime. Some purchases, and then a lot for travel and training. And you know, we've had to go to a plan where officers have to use flex time or comp time in lieu of paid overtime. We've had to I've actually had to use a good portion of my overtime this year already just to supplement patrol squads because we've been short. I have a difficult time in Newman, which is a whole other conversation, hiring officers. I've had openings since I've been there, and we just have some difficulties there due to the location and some other things. But so we've had to use overtime. And, you know, we've suspended some things like bilingual pay, certain incentive pays, stuff we've just had to do to get by. But, you know, it's about monitoring it. As a police chief, you have to do that, and you have to watch it and make sure you're within your ratios. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
The next question, we'll start on the end with Mr. Haley. This has 3 parts to it, so gentlemen, be careful. It's hard to answer 3 parts in 2 minutes, but I know you can handle it. It says, how would you communicate crime trends, best safety practices, and outreach to the business community? I'll read it one more time. How would you communicate crime trends, best safety practices, and outreach to our business community? And again, we're going to start with Mr. Haley.
Well, you use your staff, and many departments use non-sworn staff to compile crime analysis and trend information, and you can put that information out on the web. You can also communicate that at city council meetings, meetings with the city manager, with the news media. You can publicize that. Best safety practices, Blockwatch is a great example for shoring up your home and your community. You know, reinforce the value of programs such as Blockwatch. And then I made a note here, but business outreach. I don't know, FaxNet One, that could be a viable alternative to businesses that could use that type of service. It's so much like a network. It's a private entity, but they use crime trend information and suspect information. They get it out to all the businesses. So using all of your resources, and as police chief, of course, you're going to be required to evaluate all those things and implement them and convince the community that it's a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Goodyear.
Yes, as far as crime trends, again, crime mapping programs, good crime analysis programs, crime stats, you can put them on the website. You can get them out via media to the community. Best safety practices, you know, your community policing programs and school programs and neighborhood watches, and getting the message out that way about best safety practices. And as far as the business community, and to give you an example of a program that we used at a previous agency, when I commanded a tourist policing unit back in Central Florida, we had a large tourist base with numerous hundreds of hotels, and we had a fax network. And so anytime we had a particular type of crime, a robbery, or anything happen, or some type of forgery at one of these hotels, it would immediately go out, be coordinated by the police department, and go out in the fax network. So like that, all the hotels would have information, suspect information, and information on that crime that occurred. So that's just an example of how we interacted with the business community and kept them informed.
Mr. Kusan.
Thank you. Crime trends. We have a established program in the police department called CompStat. That's how we trend crimes. We take a very proactive approach to combating displacing criminal activity. It's a great opportunity for us to information share, map out where we're getting burglaries, where we're getting thefts, where we're having shoplifts, things of that nature. And we do now communicate that out to our block watch captains, other community representatives today. As I spoke to earlier, we're in the infancy of it, but this new program that we're going to start is going to be Business Watch, and that communication will also be set to our business community. Get them online. We have a neighborhood response unit of 1. As a matter of fact, I was talking with that individual just today, as I mentioned earlier, and we might not be able to afford a full-time employee at this point, but we have some volunteers in police services who'd be more than willing to give assistance to get this program up off the ground, get it monitored, and start getting this information to our business community, because they too are just as important as our residents. So we're going to call it Business Watch, and we would include in those communications best safety practices, especially now we're coming upon the holidays, to communicate to the businesses about how to maybe better safeguard their customers. Maybe they shouldn't put things so close to the door. How we can prevent them from becoming the next victim, the business. So certain safety tips in regards to that
10 seconds.
Would certainly be helpful to that business community, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Thank you. We'll start in the middle this time with Mr. Geyer. And the question is, if selected as Goodyear Police Chief, what are your top 3 priorities? If selected as Goodyear Police Chief, what are your top 3 priorities?
Okay, first of all, I would say that my first priority is to learn as much as I can about the agency, start the morale and trust building process by interacting with my employees, as well as council members, mayor, department heads, and learning as much as I can about the agency, getting recommendations, suggestions, and seeing the best way that we need to go. Secondly, I would say learning as much as I can about the budget. And again, looking at what ways can we save? What other funding sources do we have? What else can we do? What grants can we get? Can we increase our volunteer base? And looking at that aspect to see how we can proceed and be more efficient and effective in this time of the economy. Third, I would say evaluate our community policing activities and work on interacting with the community and bringing in new programs, again, to increase the trust and to earn that trust from the community and proceed that way with the community involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kusan?
My top 3 priorities, number 1 is Citygate, to get through the recommendations, provide back to council information about where we are in the recommendations, and to try to get some of those issues resolved. We've even before we got the report, we had about 50% of those already resolved. Things that my staff and I had thought of that we needed to change right away. So we just need to finish that off. I think that's a priority of ours. Second for me is investment in the training and leadership in our organization. Continue to send our leaders to management and leadership schools, and some of which I've already mentioned. I think are very vital and important to us. Lastly, to me, another priority is to invest in our volunteers and police services. Spend more time in tough budget times. Get as many volunteers on board as we can to help us out. They can do, like I mentioned earlier, a variety of things for us. Help out with our neighborhood response unit. It's a unit of one. Help out in bike patrols. Increase our patrol division, as you will, in volunteers and police services. So those are my top priorities, and I think that sends a positive and a very strong message to our community that I understand fiscal responsibilities. I understand I need training in my leadership. And lastly, Citygate is something that is very important to us all.
Thank you. And Mr. Haley.
Well, I think first of all, I need to build an open and honest relationship with the mayor, members of the council, the city manager's office, the other department heads, as being a person that is open and available to any and all. Second thing is to build a relationship with the community, to communicate to the community what my goals would be, what my goals are from the police department, how to improve police services through continual improvement, training, mentorship. And then third, yes, it's a review of the organizational structure, and of course that takes into account the Citygate report to ensure to the community that those recommendations are evaluated, and if they do need to be implemented, and to attempt to resolve the issues that have occurred in the last year or two here in the community relating to the police department, try to get those behind us and to move forward and to build on that and to build a positive relationship and to gain the trust back.
Thank you. The next question will start here with Mr. Kusan. Crime statistics have been used by many police departments. How have you used this method to keep the community safe?
Crime statistics. As I mentioned earlier, our CompStat, we meet monthly. We get monthly reports from our lieutenants. All of our lieutenants are responsible for beat areas that are within our city. And they are responsible for monitoring, our patrol lieutenants, for monitoring those beat areas of criminal activity. And throughout the month making any adjustments or uses of resources to try to displace or disperse that what's going on in that particular area. So we use statistics well to our advantage as a proactive measure to so we're not reactive all the time. Our lieutenants have a very high responsibility in that they're held accountable for their areas, their beat areas, every month to command staff. And they have to report on, this is what's happening in my beat, this is what I'm doing about it, and I'm going to give you the results here the next month as if whether my plan worked or not. So we're constantly monitoring that process and that program, and it's such a valuable piece and a valuable tool to us to not be a reactive police department, but be proactive. And that statistical information that we use only helps us in our efforts, and that basically is the foundation that we have used for the last few years to help us combat criminal activity.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
Crime statistics are one factor involved in how to do a successful community policing program. And yes, as often as you can get it, review crime trends, maybe do some projections on where crime may occur, and you might have to make some organizational changes to reduce overtime to combat that crime. Another big issue, though, is what are you giving to the community? If the community does not know that there is an issue, how are they going to work with us and provide information? So I've been at meetings where we had to tell the community that there was a serial rapist that had struck 6 times, and they're like, it's happened 6 times and you guys haven't talked to us about this yet? It took a long time to put the investigation together, but I think it's critical to notify the community, and we've talked about Block Watch, citizens on patrol, using school resources, using information sources to provide data and information to the police department. So I think crime statistics, computer statistics, CompStat, computer statistics is one factor, but you have to take in a total, you have to take a global view. And it may even mean that I go to Mr. Fischbach and ask for additional positions It may be to a point where the police department needs to expand, and just as the community expands. So you can use those statistics also for that, and maybe provide justification to the community for that added expense. So there's a myriad of things that you can use crime statistics for. And yes, crime tracking, crime projection, yes, those are one of the factors, but there are other factors involved also.
Thank you. Mr. Geyer.
This is probably going to be a repeat of what you've heard, but again, crime statistics and dealing with CompStat and having CompStat programs. And I was actually, back in my large agency in Florida, was trained in the CompStat program from New York City PD, the inventors of it. And you know, as a captain, I was grilled once a week on crime trends and things going on in my community for hours. And although I would never do that in one of my agencies, but having a scaled down CompStat program with some crime accountability and holding the lieutenants and the commanders and the captains a bit accountable for crime occurring in their area, I think is important. Looking at having aggressive crime analysis programs, crime mapping programs, you know, interacting with the community and getting the message out to them. The community is our eyes and ears, and my public information officer in my agency does a good job at putting out press releases, and we keep the community informed of crime trends and serious crimes occurring. So that information's out there, and we get a lot of response, a lot of feedback from the community, because our press releases usually go on with anybody having any information about this crime or similar crimes. We get a lot of feedback, and we solve a lot of crimes that way. So having that community interaction and CompStat programs, using crime statistics, very important.
Thank you. Our next question, as a mother of 4 and a leader of teenagers, could you please share your ideas on outreach to our schools, high schools, and any background dealing with drugs or gangs? This happens to be my favorite question, by the way. I don't know why. But anyway, just to read it one more time. As the mother of 4 and the leader of teenagers, could you please share your roles or your roles on outreach to our schools, high schools, and any background dealing with drugs and gangs? Thank you. You ready? All right. We'll start, I believe is it Mr. Haley? You're first up.
Well, it goes without saying that you have to have an open discussion with the administrators of the school, more than likely discussions with the teachers at one of their staff meetings. And you have to bring in experts. You may have to bring in a GAIN program, which is gang resistance, or I'm sorry, that's the GREAT program, gang resistance, or drug awareness. There's a lot of programs out there that on how to communicate to teenagers about the evils of drug use and alcohol use. You bring in victims. You can do that. There are many, many programs out there. But I think what's critical is that if this is posed to me as an issue, that there has to be an immediate response, because we're talking about young, impressionable people that may not be in an environment that I grew up in, a loving and a wonderful environment. They may be on the street. They may not be being cared for, and they might turn to alcohol or drugs or gangs or whatever. So you have to provide them with alternatives. And I'm not advocating that the police department be the person that solves the problem. What I'm saying is that the police department could be a conduit for information for these young people to consider when they think about using drugs, alcohol, or other being involved in other criminal activity.
Thank you. Mr. Geyer?
It's about the educational programs, and I can tell you in Yuma we have SROs who have great relationships in the schools, and I instituted a great program where we now have officers in some of the elementary schools and junior high schools, and they do programs there. And part of their curriculum involves drugs, alcohols, gang, staying away from gangs. But our SROs have a great relationship with the schools, and they do a lot of education. I've got a very proactive gang unit and narcotics unit, and they do programs at the schools too and educate our children. As in my previous agency, as the director of the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco in Florida, that's what we did. That's one of our main functions. I spent years involved in programs educating our youth on the dangers of alcohol and tobacco and drug use. Did that for several years. So it goes back to your proactive narcotics enforcement, your gang enforcement, your education in the schools, good SRO and great programs, and to all, combat this issue. So,
Thank you. Mr. Kusan?
Thank you. I'd first like to tip my hat to the mother with the 4 teenagers. What is my role? To pair it off of what the other 2 candidates said, I talked earlier about our school resource officer program, and as a matter of fact, we at the city of Goodyear probably have the most school resource officers per capita at schools than any other city, and I'm very proud of that. All of our high schools have school resource officers with an education component, so we do reach our teenagers on alcohol, drugs, and so forth. But we also have established those relationships that I spoke to early on in this forum about the crimes that the relationship is so important because our officers get so many kids that come up to them. They may not tell anybody else, but they tell that officer that they trust because he's the SRO. And they don't look at him as he or she as, the bad policeman. They look at him as, he or she is officer-friendly SRO. He's at our school every day who shakes my hand and says, hey, are you having a good day? What do you got for lunch? And that interaction is so important. So that early detection, and the officers do a good job, too, of keeping their eyes open for those early detection of abuse of alcohol, or some kid that's in a gang who's carrying a backpack that maybe yesterday he didn't have all this gang paraphernalia on it, and today he shows up and he's got some gang stuff on it. So it's very critical that they're in the schools and they can recognize that stuff to catch those things occurring very early on. And so our school resource officer program is very, very important to us. We do a lot of community outreach programs with our teenagers, one of which we do is our Teen Academy that we hold every summer, and we get a group of kids together, 30 to 40 kids, and they go through a Teen Academy, and they get to learn about police work for a couple of weeks. It's a very exciting program. So those are just a couple of examples of how we can reach our young people and interact with them in a positive manner.
Thank you. We'll start for our next question. This will start in the middle with Mr. Goodyear. What has been the most challenging situation or circumstance that you've had to deal with, and what, if anything, would you do differently? What has been the most challenging situation or circumstance that you've had to deal with, and what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Well, probably one of the most challenging things that I can talk about is my coming to Yuma and having an agency in the situation it was in, being stagnant, and bringing in programs and trying to change what was culture there, and getting the trust of the staff as their leader, and promoting a vision, making change in people who some were change resistant, and after implementing many programs and after, going on 3 years of being there, some of the programs has taken almost this long to really be successful because there was some resistance to change. And there was culture there. There's still culture there, just like in any place. But, just going in there, doing a reorganization, bringing that agency to where it's become a model agency, ready to proceed with accreditation, was a huge thing, and probably one of the most difficult tasks I've had to face.
Mr. Kusan?
I thought there was a second part to that question. Can you repeat the whole question?
Sure. Let me get that for you. What has been the most challenging situation or circumstance that you've had to deal with, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
The most challenging situation or circumstance that I've been in is obviously what I've endured over the last 8 months in my interim chief of police job here at the city of Goodyear. After being brought in and spoken to about what was expected of me and what the challenge, I'd like to call them opportunities, were for me, was quite an undertaking. There were several things that were occurring. It's no secret to this forum or anybody that's listening about what was occurring in our agency back in March. So there were a lot of things that followed. There were several internal investigations that were launched, criminal investigations. There were reorganization. All these things were occurring. I had to convince my staff of 128 people who were looking up and saying what of uncertainty and turmoil and what are we going to do, where are we going to go, and I had to send them a very strong message early on that I'm the person that's going to take you there, we're going to be fine, and let's stay together. In that particular moment in any agency, when you have something of that magnitude that happens, one of two things can occur. Either the agency completely splinters apart and everybody has their own agenda, or they come together as a cohesive unit and they say, you know, we're going to move forward and let's do this together. And that's what our agency did. And so that was the most challenging time. What would I have done differently? I think the thing that I may have done differently was perhaps meet with the police staff maybe a little bit earlier on, rather than waiting until I think it was day 3 or so after I was given the interimship. Maybe a quicker response from me to get out in front of the staff maybe a little bit sooner to let them know that we were going to be all right and that I was the right person that was chosen for this position.
10 seconds.
You know, again, just to reassure them that all of it's a time of uncertainty and turmoil, that the right person was in the position today to do the job.
Mr. Haley.
I think the most challenging thing that ever happened to me was we had an officer killed in the line of duty, and there was an outcry to staff patrol with 2 officer cars. Phoenix PD has had a long-standing policy and tradition that most cars are staffed with 1 person. So what I had to do was I had to devise a plan within about 48 hours to take detectives, to take people that had not worn a uniform in years, and to put them in a patrol car with another officer. And you're talking about a disruption of life, and police officers are no different than anyone else, is that they are very resistant to change, and there was fear, there was apprehension that officers that had not worked the streets in many, many years were being put out to the wolves. So that was a huge project, and we're talking about an organization with 3,200 sworn people that we had to organize, me and my staff had to organize into assignments at the various precincts, days, hours, what their new days off were going to be, what their hours were going to be. These are long-term employees that worked 8 to 5 Monday through Friday that were thrown into a situation where they were working from 4 in the afternoon till 2 in the morning with Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays off, and it was a disruption. I think that I think in hindsight, with such a short turnaround in time, that we could have slowed it down a very little bit, but more than likely involved the affected
10
officers,
seconds.
divisions, and bureaus in more dialogue on why it was being done. But it was a very difficult time.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we've come to that moment. We're going to have your closing statements. Again, we'd like to thank you for both rounds this evening. And again, we'd like to thank you for being finalists and being here tonight. And I think on behalf of the group and the mayor and the city council, we'd also like to extend our appreciation for your expertise. And again, thank you for your interest in Goodyear. We'd like to give you maybe 15 seconds to gather your thoughts. We're going to continue the same pattern. So, Mr. Kusan, you'll be first. We'll give you a few seconds to think. I know when you go through different rounds and different kinds of procedures, it can be difficult just to all of a sudden change gears. So why don't you take a couple seconds if you want to jot a note or two. And with our schedule the way it is, we might have 5 minutes at the end to mingle again with the audience as you did in the beginning of the process. So give yourself 30 seconds and we'll get that underway. So. This time we'll get started. Mr. Hassan.
Okay, thank you. My closing remarks are these. I've served the city of Goodyear and its citizenry for 17 years. I have worked the holidays. I have missed Christmases. I have been here on Thanksgiving. I have dedicated and committed my professional career to the city of Goodyear since the day I started. And I have served the city well. I have held every rank in the police department. I have been loyal to the city and the police department for all these years. I have experience in training, in leadership, in management. I have been involved in all of the decisions that have been made, critical decisions over the last 8 months that I think that any chief would view as being probably the most critical time in their career. And those difficult opportunities, those difficult challenges, those difficult decisions that I had to make, I did them. I have served this city to the best of my ability. I will continue to. My plan is to retire from the city of Goodyear. I want to end my career here where I started. I have a great relationship with city management. I have an incredible relationship with our workforce and our labor group. I have an even better relationship with our other departments. So I believe that I am absolutely the person that should be in this chair. I have the experience, the knowledge, the skill sets to do the job effectively. I have proven that I can do it, and I ask you to allow me the opportunity to continue to lead this group.
Thank you. Mr. Haley.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I don't want to sound too arrogant, but this is an opportunity for you to toot your own horn. I sincerely believe that there are 3 very qualified candidates sitting before you today, but I do believe that I am the best qualified. I have the best ability. I have the most experience. I am not advocating that I'm going to bring big city policing to the city of Goodyear, but I do believe that based on my experiences and my exposure to big city experiences in policing, that I can lead this organization into the next series of events that are definitely going to occur here as this community grows. I've been the go-to person at the Phoenix Police Department for many years. The chief, the assistant chiefs, the executive officers have tasked me with many, many projects because they have the confidence that I can get the job done. And I see no barriers to prevent me from getting the job done here in Goodyear. I, of course, am an outsider. You all know Chief Kassan. He's well-liked and trusted, so it is a very difficult nut to crack. But I am making a total commitment to the community of Goodyear to provide the best possible police service and to continue making this department a very, very, very good department and a well-respected department in Arizona. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Goodyear.
Thank you. As far as my experience of what I can bring, I have 20 years of experience in law enforcement. I have diverse experience from around the country, being with state agencies, county agencies, and municipal agencies. I am currently a police chief, and I've taken an agency that had morale issues, that had trust issues, that had communication issues, that had issues where they were real connected with the community, and I've turned that agency around and led it to be a model agency. I've experienced everything practically and every unit that law enforcement has to offer. I'm fiscally responsible. I've been through significant budget cuts. I've been praised by my city manager and city staff for being efficient and effective amidst all those severe cuts. I'm committed to community policing. I've instituted many, many programs in UMA, my previous agencies, and I could take the community policing here in Goodyear to a higher level. I'm a visionary, and I can set the vision for this agency and give everybody the direction on here's where we need to go, here's how we're going to get there. I've improved morale in my current agency, and I can do that here. I've got great relationships with city managers, the mayor, city council, and other department directors. And again, this is a great opportunity. This is a community that my wife and I know. We come up here all the time, and that's what people in Yuma do. They come up to Phoenix or they go to San Diego on the weekends because you just don't have everything down there. So, you know, this is a community that we want to be in. And like the other candidates, I'm very committed to this opportunity. And, you know, I want to thank the city of Goodyear and for the opportunity. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you tonight. We thank everyone who's here and everyone who's been watching outside here with their live streaming. Have a wonderful evening. The candidates can commingle here for about 5 minutes, and then they'll wrap up for this evening. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well done, gents. Yeah, you too. Man, great job.